You never know what little weird idiosyncrasies of your life are going to be an important part of where your path goes forward. I got myself in that weird mindset of worrying about what the audience is going to think. Instead of just telling the audience, this is who I am and this is what excites me, that would have been the trueness of the story. If that's your strategy, you are missing out on so much between now and when you might eventually someday, if ever, draw one of those tags. The outer wrapper that people see is a lot different than what's inside the wrapper as far as what it takes to get there. Hey folks, Randy Newberg here with another episode of the Wild Initiative with me and Sam, and we're going to talk hunting, conservation, and who knows what else. Thanks for being here.
Put down your latte and pull on your boots.
I would rest at peace for eternity if my legacy was that I made a positive influence on the non-hunting public about what hunters are and what hunting is.
I finally got my buck on our last real day of hunting.
So a pro-hunting organization is voting against hunting. And that says anti-hunting to me.
There was a year straight where I was averaging up to 200 death threats a day.
I hugged it. Like I just wanted to hug a bear.
It's proven that the average steak in a grocery store touches 50 to 100 hands and machines. And we're putting that into our body.
Hey y'all, Cable Smith, host of the Lone Star Outdoors Show here.
This is Adam Weatherby.
I'm Corey Jacobson with Elk 101.
This is Christy Titus.
Hey folks, this is John Barrett.
You're listening to The Wild Initiative.
Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of The Wild Initiative, brought to you as part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective. All right, y'all, getting on to today's episode. I'm super excited to have this week's guest on, y'all. This has been 3 years in the making for me. Really, this man needs no introduction. He's the host of Fresh Tracks TV on Amazon Prime. He is one of the co-hosts of the Elk Talk podcast with Corey Jacobson, and he is the host of Fresh Tracks with Randy Newberg, the one and only Randy Newberg, y'all. I have been working to get Randy on really since the first year I started the podcast. His was one of the first podcasts that I started listening to. Always loved the tips, tactics, and the stories that came out of it. Randy is an incredible advocate for the outdoors, for public land hunting, and just really an all-around great guy. So I am super excited to have him on. I've been bugging him for quite a while, but there's very few people out there that spends more time in the woods than Randy Newberg, and so his free time is at a premium. I really appreciate him taking the time to come on. So without further ado, y'all, enjoy this week's episode with the one and only Randy Newberg.
I'll tell you, every time, you're going to get a kick out of this story. Every time I hit the record button on this device, I think of you.
Uh-oh.
Because when I first started listening to hunting podcasts back in the day, I had a buddy suggested a few, and he's like, you should listen to Gritty, and you should listen to The Rich Outdoors, and you should listen to Randy Newberg and Jay Scott and all these. And, he gave me like the list. And I remember it probably had to be first handful of episodes of your show I ever listened to. You sat and you talked about how you forgot to hit the record button. You recorded an entire podcast without hitting the record button. From then on, that just stuck in my head, and I've been so paranoid. Knock on wood, I've never not hit the record button. But there will be times halfway through the episode, I'll look down.
Oh, I always do now.
And for some reason, it just won't look like it's recording, and your stomach drops.
You feel this big pulse of panic adrenaline. One other time, I double punched the record button. And I had Jonathan Hart from Sitka, Jared Frazier from 2% for Conservation, and who was there from First Light? I'm trying to remember. One of the First Light people was there. And this is really good stuff. I mean, I got two competing clothing companies who share this conservation vision on the same podcast.
I think that was the episode. I think that was the one, yeah.
And I looked down, and when it dawned on me, I'm going waving my hands. And they're looking at me like, does Randy got to go to the bathroom or what? I said, folks, I hate to tell you this. I double punched the button and we got 40 minutes that didn't get recorded. I was so embarrassed. But, if you do enough of them, something's going to happen. It's kind of like when you're out hunting, the guy who says, oh, I never miss. Well, you either haven't shot much or you're full of crap. So, hey, I appreciate you having me here.
No, of course. I'll tell you what.
So you want to know what's funny? I'm down at TAC in Salt Lake City. So you and I bumped into each other at TAC up here in Big Sky.
Yeah.
It seems like that's where we always connect. I go to Salt Lake City, and this family of people are standing around, and when I finally get to them, the mother or the wife says, my husband has a favor of you, but he's too embarrassed to ask. I'm like, well, what's that? I'm pretty much game for anything. And she says he wants to change his voicemail message and have you record it. I'm like, sure, give me your phone. So he punches everything and, it says at the beep, record your message. I'm like, hey, folks, Randy Newberg here. I am, I can't remember his name, Tyler or something. I'm Tyler's secretary for the day. You know the drill. Leave a message. He'll call you back when he's not hunting. Bleep. And the whole family, they were like, oh, that's the greatest whatever birthday present or whatever Dad got this year.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Some of the number of people who ask to officiate weddings, it's like, you people have no idea how below average I am. if you folks were sitting here with Sam and I right now looking at this messy office that we've outgrown, this used to be my CPA firm. This building.
I was kind of curious.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious about that.
But when the CPA firm outgrew this building, they moved up on the north end of town, and I kept this suite. One of my partners kept that suite. And
okay.
So I thought, well, this will last me forever. We had 5 employees when we moved in here. Now we're up to 12. So we're building a new office. We'll have a podcast studio there.
Oh yeah.
So
I mean, it's a good problem to have if you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, it is. It's just I'm 56, and I've told my wife she thinks that every time I say this, it's because I'm ready to drop another dumb idea on her. I always tell her, well, next year's going to be more sane. We'll have the building built. We'll have the blah, blah, blah. And she just looks at me like, you know what? I've heard that every year that we've been married. And it gets less sane every year. I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. Thanks for hanging in there with me.
So I'll tell you another funny coincidence. And I just forgot about this until you mentioned the CPA firm. It was several years ago. It was pretty much my first time back to Montana since I've been an adult. Like the last time I was in Montana, I think it was for a flash in the pan. I was visiting Yellowstone. I was like 6 years old or something. Family road trip. It was very National Lampoons. My mom's probably rolling her eyes at me right now, but to some extent it was. We saw a family of tourists put their toddler on a bison.
Oh no!
Yeah,
well, that's not going to turn out good.
It's one of those stories. I've told it probably on the podcast a million times, but it's one of those stories. You think back and you're like, I'm so young. You like. Maybe I made it up, and you've told it so many times you can picture it. And finally I went to my folks. I'm like, did this actually happen? They're like, nope, that happened exactly. Yeah, whole family, they legit put their toddler on so they could take pictures.
Gosh.
But so my first time back to Montana as an adult, I'm on a road trip. I'm just coming through, and I'm spending some time in Bozeman. And I go to get some breakfast downtown somewhere, and I'm just sitting next to this family, and I'm working away, and you just make conversation. I can't help but make conversation with everyone else. And one of the guys, he's like, my boss, he's kind of does a bunch of hunting stuff too, and I think he's got a podcast. Because we had talked about it, I had my podcast. I think he's got a podcast, and I'm like, oh, what do you do? And he's like, I work at a CPA firm. I'm like, oh, I think I know who that is. And he's like, yeah, have you ever heard of Randy Newberg? I'm like, oh yeah. But yeah, I've talked with him. I've talked with him a bunch of times.
Or Landon,
Landon.
Okay. Yeah.
So Landon, if you're listening, I think he's listened to a couple episodes of the podcast. But Landon, if you're listening, shout out to you for that.
Yeah, actually, Landon's probably saying, Randy offered to sell me one of his bows, and he hasn't sold it to me yet. So, Landon, if you are listening, I still haven't got my replacement bow, so that's why you haven't been able to buy the one that's over here in the corner. So, but yeah, it's weird, being a CPA for as long as I was. I sold my partnership interest a few years back and worked as a contract employee for him. And then last summer, I kind of said, you know what, and I'm down to one client now, but the amount of things I did in the outdoor space that were super helpful for being a CPA. The number one thing was my beaver trapping. So I grew up beaver trapping, muskrat, whatever I needed to do to make some extra money. So here in the valley, before it got really crowded and just hectic like it is today, but in the 90s, all these ranchers and farmers found out there was a CPA that would come and trap your beaver for you. So I ended up with so many ranch and farm family clients because of my beaver trapping.
That is so funny. That's you would never think how that would cross over.
Yeah. Well, then a bunch of doctors live over here near the hospital where Sourdough Creek goes through. And they're scattered, over a 4 or 5 mile section there in the neighborhoods. And one doctor, who was a client, I went and trapped his beaver. Well, he starts telling all the other doctors, well, this guy will take care of the beaver problem. So I ended up with all kinds of medical practices as clients because of my beaver trapping. So you never know what paths or, what little weird idiosyncrasies of your life are going to be an important part of where your path goes forward. So,
oh yeah,
I'm sure when I was 14 years old trapping beaver out on the Pine Island State Forest of northern Minnesota, if you would have told me that would have been one of my better recruiting tools in an accounting firm. I've never belonged to a country club. I don't own a pair of golf clubs. I don't do any of the normal things. How do I go and do business development? No, I have a sign, have traps, will travel.
I mean, in my late 20s, early 30s, if you had told me that this bachelor party I was going to in Vegas, where we were going to end up at the gun store shooting all kinds of guns. I mean, I shot guns prior to that. It was fun, but that's what I really credit for getting me into firearms and then into hunting and then into this and that, the other. It was me in a 3-piece suit, smoking a cigar, shooting fully automatic weapons. If you'd told that guy back then that he would be out here in Montana, hunting, running his own business, doing all this stuff, again, you never know what, like you said, what little weird decisions or idiosyncrasies or paths you take are going to completely change your trajectory.
Yeah. So that's why I tell people, do whatever you think is interesting and is pleasurable, because you'll enjoy it, you'll be good at it, and you'll meet some interesting people along the way.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, I mean, that's why I started this whole thing. I was wanting to get into hunting. I was like, well, crap, I'm living in Los Angeles at the time, and I'm working in the music industry and in advertising. I'm like, I don't know anybody that does this. And, I was fortunate enough to meet one guy. He was actually my second ever podcast guest. But, he kind of put me in the right direction.
Yeah.
But, I didn't have a community of hunters to figure out.
Oh, I suppose it's...
So I'm like, screw it. I'm going to build my own community. And if I'm going to build a community, I'm going to build it with the best dang people I know. And so I'm like, well,
that's funny.
How can I just reach out to people and be like, I want to ask you pointed questions about this thing I want to learn for the next hour and a half.
Yeah. How long were you in LA?
I mean, I was there up until about 3 years ago, something like that.
Huh. I didn't know that.
I lived in Los Angeles for the majority of the time. I was running the podcast and all that when we first met, and because I think Corey Jacobson initially introduced us via email. I'd been introduced to him by someone else, and and he was one of my earlier podcast guests as well. And I was like, hey, do you think you could introduce me to Randy Newberg?
I you do is hang out at the Daily Coffee Bar in Bozeman or the Dairy Queen on North 7th, then the odds are you're going to get a chance to bump into me.
Well, I remember that same road trip where I was in Bozeman. I was like, well, okay, I'm in Bozeman. I have to go to Randy Newberg's Dairy Queen one time. And I posted a picture and I tagged you in it. And I think you either commented or you shared it or something. And I fanboyed so hard. I was like, oh my gosh, Randy Newberg commented on one of my posts.
Sam, we should have had my wife on this podcast because she would have just, what you just said there, she would have rolled her eyes and said, this guy is so below average. Why would anybody get excited about talking to him or meeting him? Let me tell you, she'd say, let me tell you about Randy. She'd lean forward and say, you want to know about Randy? And my whole gig would be up. She'd tell the truth about what a kind of slow-minded, below-average dude I am. But you know what? If that's what works, I guess right now, we're going with that stick right now.
Well, so then, average guy, below-average guy. But I'm looking around. You know, we're in the office here.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of elk and quite a few muleys, and I'm seeing a nice pronghorn and a big old moose on the wall. So what the hell? How does a below average guy get out in the woods like this and see all this kind of success?
You just don't give up. My wife would say that my best skill in life is my bullheadedness, determination, whatever you want to call it. I grew up in a little logging town of 500 people called Big Falls, Minnesota, way up near the Canadian border. And at the time, you know, when you grow up somewhere, you're like, oh, I can't wait to get out of this place, or I'm going to this, or I'm going to that. Little did I know that growing up there, always having to prove yourself. I don't care. Like when we'd go play sports at we were always the smallest school, the smallest group of people. And so you kind of just accepted the fact that life isn't very easy. You know, whatever you want, you better go and work for it and get after it. And for jobs, I mean, none of us got to go to summer camps or anything like that. You're working out in the woods, or you're stacking lumber at the sawmill, or I had a lawn mowing route before they'd let me work in the woods, and then I had a contraband fireworks stand. I had a bait shop. I was self-employed from about the age 7. And so anything that I've been able to accomplish, you know, when you look around here or whatever, it's not been due to immense levels of skill. It's just been because I'm like, if you tell me I can't do it, my wife is like, oh no, don't tell him that. That means he's going to try to do it. So, well, that's what I should have been like. I bet you can't come on my podcast. I bet you can't get on my podcast. There you go. That's what you should have said, Sam.
There we go, y'all. So if you're trying to get time with Randy,
Sam and I have bumped into each other, I don't know how many times in the last few years. And because we both do podcasts, the topic had come up, and I'd tell him, send me an email and I'll try to fit it in my calendar. And I'm sorry, Sam, it took this long.
I got to give you a little bit of grief about it, but as I say, I am not butthurt at all about it, because, like you're talking about, it takes stubbornness and consistency to be successful. And I think anybody that has been following you for a while knows you are probably in the woods during the year more than just about anyone else on this earth.
I'm blessed that, you know, I was looking at the calendar this year, we throttled back a little bit, but I leave.
And again, throttled back means what for you?
This year, it means that between August 15th and December 31st, I've only got about 85 nights out of town in a tent. And that was by design. Last year with COVID and everything, it was so complicated trying to produce content in other states because everybody's having to go get tested. You know, you got to be tested and have a negative test before you can go. So we're shuffling this and juggling dates, and we ate a couple tags, and I'm like, you know what? I just don't. I don't do this for that kind of insanity. I do this to have a smile on my face every day. And so we throttled back. We dropped probably 2 or 3 hunts this year compared to last year. But last year was the all-time peak. We couldn't have picked a worse year to decide, all right, we're going to really put our foot on the gas.
So how many tags was last year?
I think we did 17 trips last year among all of us. Yeah, I know. So, and that's even with canceling Oregon Roosevelt elk. But fortunately, you know, I'm blessed to have people like Marcus and Michael, and you know, they are carrying the load of hosting some of the content now. So we'll see how this year goes. The goal is to do fewer trips, slightly fewer, but still a lot. Most people, like my wife, she comes upstairs. I have the calendar on one of my whiteboards up at my house. I have what's called the Randy room, and my calendar's up there so that she knows what it is. And she comes up there and she looks at it, and she doesn't say anything. She just folds her arms across her chest and and she turns and walks away. And that's the annual realization of what she's in for. Well, this guy's not going to be around very much. And when I see her leave after that expression she makes, it's like, you know, I better let her just cool down for about an hour or two. I'll stay up here in my own little cubicle. But
hop on the flower delivery website really quick for a minute.
There you go. Hey, honey, can I get you something? But no, that's what a year looks like for us. We usually end up leaving on the road mid-August somewhere, and you know, we'll wrap it up early December, take some time off over the Christmas, New Year, and then we always go to Arizona for javelina or quail or something. We'll find something to do.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, and it's, you know, we were talking earlier, and I'm sure, you know, people hear that, you know, I mean, shoot, they hear about 7 tags versus 17, and and what we were talking about earlier, it's like, how often do you get must be nice.
Yeah, I get that a lot, and it is nice. I mean, I am blessed.
Yes, it is nice.
I am absolutely blessed. I make I don't deny that at all. But you asked me what my schedule looks like before we turned on the mics, and I said, well, personally, I have 7 tags. I have 8, but I'm turning back my Colorado deer tag because it conflicts with my son's Nevada elk tag. But, you know, when you live in Montana, you automatically get deer and elk. Mm-hmm. So that accounts for, you know, whereas people who live in some other state, say Nevada or New Mexico or, you know, someplace, Utah, you got to draw everything. Well, in Montana, we're blessed. We're going deer and elk hunting no matter what. So, in Montana, though, this year, this is when I usually get the roll of the eyes of the, it must be nice. I drew Shira's moose and mountain goat this year in Montana, same year. And I tell people, well, I know what you're thinking, but if I really had the key to the computer deck there, it wouldn't have taken me 30 years to draw a moose tag. And I would have had a sheep tag a long time ago if I had the code, so to speak. But I get it. I make, you know, I'm blessed. I'm the luckiest guy I know, and I wake up every morning. My job is to try and prove that I'm the luckiest guy on the planet. And so far, I think, you know, I'm doing a pretty damn good job proving that every day, I think. But so I don't know.
Well, I mean, you've also. And again, here's the thing: 30 years, you've put in your time. Oh yeah. You worked as a CPA for a long time, and it kind of has the benefit of it. It leaves you pretty damn open for the fall season. Like
no, it does. And
your spring season probably gets a little bit rough.
Yeah, it's ugly in the spring, but that was by design. My wife will always tell people he would have not become a CPA if hunting season was in the spring or tax season was in the fall. Exactly, darling. I I knew that if you get into the tax side of the accounting world, you get 75 to 80% of your work done by April 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife loves to fish. So when our son was younger, she said, we're fishing 60 days of summer. I'm like, all right, put them on the calendar. Let's see if we can do it. And we did it quite a few summers.
Heck yeah.
And then in the fall, you get a lot of other flexibility and freedom. So very often I get the comment of, man, I'd like to have your job, or what do I do to get your job, talking about hunting so much. I said, well, the first thing you do is have a really good day job and keep it. You know, most people don't realize that I worked 2 jobs for the longest period of time, and then I started scaling back at the CPA firm probably 10 years ago, but still had my share of demands. My wife, to her credit, always said, we made a commitment when we started these platforms in 2008 that this would not become our livelihood. She said, if this becomes your livelihood, you're going to grow to hate it. And if you grow to hate it, that's not going to work. So I promised her, all right, I'll keep working my other job and do this at the same time. And then we had a deal that when all of our other sources of income were enough to replace the CPA world, that I'd walk away from that. And unfortunately, this isn't one of those sources of income yet, Sam. I'm still working on it. This is when we have our quote-unquote board of directors meeting at the end of every year. She'll look at the financial statements and say, would you tell one of your CPA clients to do this? Don't ask that question, honey. But I could do it differently, and I could probably make money at it. But for me, it's about growth and trying to accomplish the things we want to do. If we were in the other rooms, you'd see on the whiteboards, it says what we're supposed to do every day. And in the big letters, it just says to promote self-guided public land hunting and create advocates for that cause. I mean, what an easy job. You got to promote public lands, promote hunting, and create advocates for conservation and access and hunting. That's a hell of a deal.
Heck yeah. I think people, and I've probably talked about this a bunch on the podcast too, is I think people get this assumption that they make this assumption that people like you or even like Corey or Ryan or Brian Call or any of these people, that their entire job is all they have to do is just go out and hunt, and everything just magically happens, and all you do is you hunt and you skin your animals and you eat food and you sit back, and that's just living the life. And
yeah. I would bet that I've taken maybe 5 or 6 days off so far this year. And I haven't even been out hunting this year. Mm-hmm. That's how much goes on behind the scenes. But, I get that unless you live what, the daily life of what it takes to produce all this content, it's not.
Yeah.
I don't expect people to understand how much work it is. Just like, someone else has whatever job, I don't understand how much. I'm like, well, how could he not have that done already? Well, I don't do his daily work, so I don't understand what all goes into it and how much planning and training and, experimenting and blah, blah, blah. So I get it. But you're right. It's
well, so many
the facade, the outer wrapper that people see is a lot different than what's inside the wrapper as far as what it takes to get there.
Well, and it's so romanticized too. And like you said, your wife was like, I don't want this to be your sole source of income because then it's going to ruin it. And, this isn't even like to call this a source of income for me would be a laugh. Yes, sometimes money comes in, but it very rarely is more than what goes out for this. And even for me, like I'll go out and it's really hard to just go on a fishing trip. Mm-hmm. Like very hard, because in the back of your head, you're always thinking like, well, I should probably at least be getting some photos or maybe taking a little bit of a video so, I can just make sure I have some extra. And I just got back from the tobacco roots a couple of days ago. I had a friend come into town, and I felt guilty enough because I had missed hanging out with her the last few times she's been around. And she's like, all right, if I come up, we're going camping, we're going fishing.
Yeah.
And so we went up to the tobacco roots and caught a bunch of cutthroats and had a great time. And, I took a few photos here and there, mostly just fish selfies and stuff. But I told myself, I'm like, if I'm going to go up and do this, I'm going to hang out with my friend. We're going to drink a shit ton of beer. We're going to fish. And I'm not going to worry about, like, quote unquote, creating content. Yeah. And, I mean, fortunately, she took a bunch of pictures because she does the same thing. So,
okay.
But it was nice. It was just nice to actually go fishing for once. And I think sometimes it's easy to stress yourself out about doing something you love.
Yeah, I definitely could do that. For me, there's a couple things I really love about the job or the situation I find myself in. I love the people. Like you see me at TAC and I'm just like wading into the crowd, man. I love this. This is, hearing everybody's story and hearing how excited they are for what they're going to do this fall and how much hunting means to them or their family. That's one of the highlights of what I get to do. Whereas I understand that for a lot of people in my situation, when they do their quote unquote appearance at a booth or something, they're like heading to the hotel room, lock the door, and give me some downtime. I'm just wired differently. I'm kind of a goofball. I love that part of it. I do love hunting, but I also love storytelling. And I think what a lot of people probably don't realize is we in our stuff and a lot of other people who produce stuff, it's more about telling the story than it is, I shot a big one or, I made this shot or whatever. Like the only person working here today is Marcus. He's over in one of the other offices and he's working on storylines. We're working on production books. What's the storyline? Because when you go out there, my first trip of the year is archery mule deer in Nevada. Well, the deer haven't read the script. So maybe you'll luck out and there'll be deer everywhere. But there may not be. So what's the storyline? What's the landscape story? What's the people story? What's the species story? Or maybe we just work our butts off and we get one good stock and I blow it. Okay. What's the story? So we have like these ideas of how do we pivot here or there. And every day we get up, here's the shot list of things. Here's the parts of the story we got to get today. So I suspect people think we just pull up to the trailhead, throw our packs on it, and let's go hunt. And somebody turn a camera on. Not at all. Not even close. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't come and watch what we do. So I completely understand. It's my fault, or our business's fault that people see it the way they do. We design it that way. We don't want to show them all the gory details of downloading footage and charging batteries and, talking shots this way or this shot or who got the time lapse or did we get a transition for this or, the audio was really bad on that segment. We got to find sometime today we got to get some better audio. They don't want to hear all that. They want it to look seamless and smooth and, hey, thanks for, making me laugh for 40 minutes or showing me a cool adventure. So, that just comes with how it is. So,
yeah, it's so much production involved, but I mean, shoot, I'm well aware of it. And sometimes, you'll watch one of those, you'll watch somebody else's film and you'll kind of know in the back of your head, you'll be like, I see what they did right there. Like, or that happened or.
Yeah. You do watch content differently when you do this. I even see myself watching, occasionally my wife will say, hey, I want to watch this show or this, whatever it is. I'm like, okay. So I plop down on the couch and watch it with her. And now I just look at it differently. I'm like, I wonder what lighting they're using. Oh, I can't see any mic on that person. I wonder what audio system they're using. And when they're doing breaks or transitions, I'm in something, I'm trying to think of what they're doing. And it causes you to look at it differently. But I suppose every profession, if you're a doctor, you probably look at somebody the way they're limping, like, I wonder what's wrong with them. I'm like, oh, he must have a burr under his heel. The doctor's probably like, well, this is ... Yeah. Or the mechanic, he hears me driving my clunker with 200,000 miles, and I'm like, sounds to me like I got something wrong under there. He's probably listening to it like, well, I'm sure it's this. It could be that. So, it's just what your daily life is. You're going to see things differently. And that's why I think people are such a cool curiosity to me, is I want to know what was everybody's life experience that brought them to the point that this is the lens through which they see the world today.
Well, and that's so much of what I try and do with my podcast. And, we kind of just started in and we got some of that. But like, I usually always just start out and I ask them, I'm like, what brought you here? Like, how did you, because from my perspective, I came at it late in life. Mm-hmm. I wasn't introduced to it till later in life. And so it fascinates me hearing from other people how they were introduced to hunting. And, so often you hear the same story. Like, well, I walked through the woods with my granddaddy's gun and my dad and, shot squirrels and did this and that. And then other people were like, completely out of the blue, different ways, introduced through a friend or came back from the military or this or that, or 100 different ways. And it gives you such a cool perspective, like you said, on their lens and how they experience hunting and life and how they take it in and how they portray it to other people and how they connect with other people about hunting. But then still how they can be so different from me. Mm-hmm. And I can completely connect. I mean, like, I grew up you grew up in northern Minnesota. Yeah. I grew up in Southern California, effectively 10 minutes from the beach. Like, the slightly different climates here, different experiences, situations. I mean, I did summer camps. I grew up on a cul-de-sac in a suburb.
Right. Completely different, but that's those things, Sam, intrigue me because every one of those events along the way, and whatever it is we do that piques our interest, or the people we meet who get us to look into this activity or that activity, all of that becomes this cumulative thing that is Sam, and that's how he sees the view of the world at this point. And if there's one thing I've come to learn in my years on this planet, is the lens that I saw the world through when I was 24 is way different then than it is now, just because I had the benefit of, another 32 years of life experiences that are going to make me see things or listen to things or try to understand something, or I've tried something and failed, or I've had a success, or I had a very, tough period of my life that caused me to think about this or think about that. And, those are the stories that I'm interested in. And so we try to figure out, how do we take that storytelling idea of building the life experiences that got this person, whether it's our guest or whether it's one of us, to see it the way the audience is seeing it right now. So that's why sometimes you might hear the, sounds like grandpa telling the story is uphill both ways, right? But we're trying to build some perspective that gives the audience the understanding of, oh, this is why Randy is so worked up about our tree mule deer. Or whatever it might be, or why this landscape is so interesting to him, or why it's so important to him that he gets to hunt once a year with his son or with one of his friends or one of his uncles or something. So those end up being stories that I think people are attracted to. Maybe not, but that's the way we do it. And if ever they quit watching, I guess I'll have to make up my mind if I'm going to fold the tent, sell the cameras, and ride off into the sunset.
Well, so do you ever really get to hunt anymore? Just that's
Once
just
in
a
while.
hunt?
Once in a while I do. Like, my son loves to waterfowl hunt. And when he comes back to Montana, often over the Christmas holiday, no cameras. We just go waterfowl hunting. My wife, if she is going to hunt, she likes to grouse hunt. Okay. She used to do a lot of big game hunting, but now it's mostly grouse hunting. No cameras. So, and every once in a while, I'll just go out by myself. Like last year, I tried to film my own elk hunt. I made all kinds of mistakes. Should have shot. I had many chances to shoot a bull, and don't need to go into those details. Got my mind all messed up about what I was there for, and put unrealistic pressures on myself. But
well, I mean, I think if you don't mind, I think that's a good thing to talk about. Cause I think new people coming into the woods.
This is me. So I'm filming an elk hunt in central Montana, and I start building a story around this one elk I've seen a couple times, and he's a very nice bull, but he hangs. It's like he has a mapping system somewhere where he knows where the public and private is. And I had to climb up on this knob to glass much of anything, which takes me further away from where he would hang out. And I'd see him, and by the time I could get over there, he's went the 150 yards and he's now on private. And he drops off this bench, and I can't see him on the private, but I know it's private once you drop off that bench, and he's down in there somewhere. So I'm doing that for a few days. He and I are playing cat and mouse, and then I see the last evening. And so this is another thing. My wife and I are putting our dog down at this time. Dog's 18 years old. She calls me up on the mountain. We got to put the dog down. So in my head now I'm like, oh gosh, this is my wife's companion while I'm gone. And so my mind is kind of polluted with other stuff. But here comes 3 bulls walking off this ridge, cross from private onto public. And I'm like, oh man, it was a raghorn, a 5-point, and a small 6-point. Not anything huge, but I'd have been happy with any of them. And here's where my mind goes. It's like, well, now the audience is going to think I shot one of them just because I felt the pressure to fill a tag. Well, what about this really big 6-point you've been playing cat and mouse with all week? So I'm sitting there going through this mental gymnastics, worrying about what's the audience going to think. Whereas I should have just looked at the camera and said, look at that. I'm a man of opportunity, and opportunity is walking my direction. See you later. Follow me. But no, I sat there. And I'm going through this mental exercise. And then I realized that, you know what? I don't think that big boy's coming out before dark. And I look, and now those 3 bulls have kind of made a loop. And if they start heading back to my right, which would be my east, they're going to be back on private again. And so I look at it, it's like, you know what? I don't think I can get there and cut them off in time. So how stupid is that, right? Instead of hunting for myself and just going out there, and when those 3 bulls came out, I'll tell you, Sam, I have the Randy Newberg core of his hunter and who he is. I wanted to run over that ridge, get across that bench, and shoot one of them because they were coming into a 1.5 by mile wide section of public. And they'd come off the northeast corner, and they're slowly working their way.
They're not in any hurry, taking their time.
Feeding. I haven't seen another hunter all week where I'm at. and completely undisturbed. I should have shot one of those. But I got myself in that weird mindset of worrying about what the audience is going to think. Instead of just telling the audience, this is who I am and this is what excites me, that would have been the trueness of the story.
Yeah.
But instead, I started overthinking it. And so I ended up not filling that tag.
I'll tell you, this last year, I finally got my first elk.
Cool.
I mean, it's my 4th elk season. Drew Arizona on 3 points. Yeah. I didn't believe it. I had to like call a few people and be like, okay,
is this for real?
Does this mean what I think it means? They're like, yeah, dude.
Archery or rifle?
Archery.
Oh, wow.
And I tell you what, it was the worst rut Arizona's had in 17 years, according to Fish and Game.
No, it was a tough year, as droughted out as it was last year.
And there's one thing I've learned about my Arizona hunts is that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen on the very last moment of the very last day. I shot my first deer in Arizona. All of these are archery. I shot my first deer in Arizona, and it happened again like the last 20 minutes of shooting light on the very last day of the hunt.
Wow.
Shot my javelina in Arizona with my bow. The very last day, we've made I had somebody in the grocery store recommend a spot to me. And we drove all the way out there, me and my buddy, and it was like the last kind of ditch effort on the last day. We just weren't having any luck with them. They kept disappearing.
Yeah.
See one lone javelina just walking across, and it was like the last moment of the last day. And then my elk, I was out there with John Stallone, and we were just grinding every day, and it was just they would talk a little bit in the morning, but they just were not aggressive. They just wanted to pick up their cows. And like you would call to one of them, he'd be like, screw this, pick up his cows, and he'd be gone. Yeah. He'd be the next ridge over. And we were just chasing him. And then finally, like the last day, and it was my last day with him. And I mean, I could have figured it out and stayed a few more days. Yeah. But it was like my last day with him, and we got in there. But I bring this up because I'm sitting there, and we've been grinding all this time. It's been 4 years for me chasing elk, and it's what got me into hunting. What I fell in love with was archery elk hunting, and I've got all of these people that are like invested in my story, and that probably want to see me succeed just as much as I want to succeed myself. And I'm getting in there, and we're getting in, and we know there's a big old. He was definitely over 360. I think he may have been a 380 bull. I mean, he was a big bull. Had all these cows. There's a bunch of little spikes and raghorns around him, and we could hear him, couldn't see him. And we get into this spot where we can hear him kind of come in our direction, hear all the elk, and it's like the perfect setup. We got it's like this window open where I have a nice wide window, but it's kind of tight in on us, so they can't see us coming up. But I have this window, and it's just 20 yards across, and it's a game trail they have to walk up. I'm like, the perfect setup, waiting for him to come. So we see all these cows coming by. And I'm sitting there in the back of my head. I'm like, I see way down here, I see this raghorn coming. And I'm like, I want him.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, I know there's that big bull somewhere down there. And if I'd seen that big bull, there would have been no question. If I could see him with my eyes rather than just hear him, there would have been no question I would have gone for him. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, am I going to take this raghorn? And I was sitting there questioning it, and I realized it was pride, and it was me wanting to show off having a big bull that even made me question that for a second. And
we all have that go through our head.
And I'm glad it was only a split second, and it was the thought that I came down to. I'm like, if that big bull doesn't come up, will I be able to live with myself after this hunt if I don't take this raghorn? I'm like, I will never forgive myself if I don't take this raghorn, so I'm going to effing take it now. And, oh my gosh, I ran about 40 yards up the hill and piled up, and, I mean, that was the easiest pack out.
Cool.
It was all downhill to the truck.
That's what you want.
We had hike back up with empty packs and downhill to the truck. But I tell you what,
I
tastes damn
think
good.
everybody has that go through their head. I don't care how much you've hunted. Those little weird thoughts go through your head. And for me, the reason I'm so hard on myself for last year of me letting all that mess with my mind I got the end result I deserved because I know better than to let that happen. But that's just years and years of experience of saying, you know what, I hunt for myself now. There was a time when I felt that, oh, well, what are my buddies going to think? Or, boy, I'd really like to send a picture of that big buck to my dad, Then over time, you just come to the realization that it's your tag. It's what you want out of it. It's the experience you want, whether it's you want to shoot the first one you see or you want to hunt the whole season and throw the tag in the trash. For me, that is one of the beauties of hunting. And over time and experience, you get better at carving away those little fingers that try to creep into your mind and interrupt that experience that it's for you and about your tag and your hunt. So it had been a long time since I'd had that in my head. And it wasn't so much about a pride factor or anything. It was just, is the audience going to think that I'm, succumbing to the pressure that I got to fill a tag? Well, if you watch enough of our stuff, you know that that's not a huge issue because we have plenty of hunts where we don't fill tags, and I'm fine with those. I like I said, this is the story of hunting, and I don't think it's realistic that every story we try to tell, it's got to have the big one at the end of it. We wouldn't have many stories to tell if we only only told the stories that had the big buck or the big bull at the end of the story. So,
well, I tell you, that's one of the cool things about living here in Montana too, is the opportunity it gives us to somewhat play those odds a little bit and figure out, because I mean our elk season, shoot. I mean, in some units, we can hunt elk till almost February,
right?
Like in a couple of like extended units, and
yeah, it's crazy.
And I was just kind of thinking about this year, and things have been just wild this year with the move and with my business and all of this stuff, and so I had all these grand plans. I'm like, I always love going down to Arizona for archery mule deer. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Okay.
Is that over the counter tag, and especially if you can throw a javelina on top of that,
right?
So I was planning on going down and doing that in August, and then coming up and doing later in the month and doing some pronghorn in Wyoming. I was going to burn my points there. I had Jim Zumbo on the podcast, and he was like, "Well, come on up. Well, you've never hunted pronghorn before? Well, we're going to hunt some pronghorn." I'm like, "Okay."
Jim was a great guy.
Oh yeah, what a character. And so then I was going to do that, and then I was going to come back, for elk season here, and have, elk and mule deer the rest of the year, and bear, and then waterfowl, and this and that, and, that's not even counting the spring season I had planned. Yeah, none of that's happened.
Life got in the way.
Yeah. But just looking, I got all my tags and stuff from Montana and my license, and I mean, geez, the amount we get here.
Oh.
For...
embarrassing.
Spend what, like $250 for your license, literally every single tag and
everything you can possibly do. I mean, I left when I bought all my tags this winter. What's our license year starts again March 1st, I believe.
Yeah, it's like it's weird.
Yeah. So I go in there, I get my sportsman's license with bear. So that includes deer, elk, bear, upland bird, fishing. And then I throw on my trapping license, my state access stamp. I don't even know what else I bought.
You just kind of hit all the check boxes.
I said the same as last year. And I don't think it was more than $140.
Well, yes, it's ridiculous.
It's embarrassing almost. You look at that, and then you look at other states like. In Nevada, a resident for an elk tag is like $300 or something like that. In Montana, they'd be lighting up the phone lines or something. But yeah, in Montana, we are blessed, beyond blessed, with amount of opportunity we have. The interesting part for me And I've noticed this heavily with COVID. Everybody wants to get outdoors. Mm-hmm. Have you seen how many tourists we have here the last 2 years?
I run an Airbnb in my guest room. I've had maybe 4 days where I haven't been booked since February.
Yeah, so it's crazy how many people are wanting to get out, just get out in the woods, to the river, to the lake, to the whatever. I'm like, you know what? If you want to call it infrastructure or our systems, our lands and public access, I don't know if it was built for the volume of use it's been getting the last year and a half. So I don't know if this is going to slowly...
They changed Glacier now, I think, to a reservation system.
I heard something to that effect.
Just the other day, and I'm like, wait, Glacier? Like...
Yeah.
The whole point is just you can cruise in and like...
I talked to some people who were up in Yellowstone. They asked me if I wanted to come with. I'm like, you know what? Every time I got family or friends, I get to play tour guide in Yellowstone. I'll pass if you don't mind. But they came back through a couple days later. They're like, it's chaos. There's the facilities like restrooms and any of that stuff. There's the stores that are up there are operated by a company has the concession contract there. I guess they can't keep any inventory for drinks and snacks, and it's like, wow. I don't know. I wonder if it'll last. If this is, a bubble that, like a lot. We've seen bubbles before. I've never seen a bubble this big.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Is it going to go away?
We'll have to see. All I know is I am very glad to be a resident here now and paying resident tag prices, because there's a reason our tag prices are so fantastic, because I've been a non-resident here and I know how much it costs.
Montana wrote the book on how to lay the pipe to the non-resident. And I tell people that, our ratio of resident to non-resident fees is the highest in the West. It just... How it has been in Montana.
I'll tell you what, even as a non-resident, though, coming out here, and, everybody's probably listening to this section of the podcast and going, shut up.
Oh, yeah. They're all saying, don't go there.
But even as a non-resident, like, I think it was like $1,200 for my Sportsman's Life for the elk, mule deer, fishing, the basic stuff. More than worth it. Like, especially as somebody that hunts non-resident on a regular basis, like, Arizona, whether it's Arizona, Idaho, Colorado, whatever. I mean, you get that full season. You get so much opportunity here, and you can hunt effectively the entire state for, you may not be able to chase bulls. It depends on the license you get and or the tags you get. But you're paying what, $600-700 for an out-of-state license and elk tag already.
Yeah.
And that's what you get 3 weeks to hunt.
Well, in depending on Colorado, some of their seasons are 5 to 9 days.
Yeah.
And you're paying $600 and some bucks. And here, we got 6 weeks of archery followed. We give them a 5-day break and then 5 weeks of rifle.
Yep.
For, like you said, most of the state for deer and elk.
And then if you are really feeling frisky, like even in that 5-day break, some units have that shoulder season where you can still take your bow out. And there was like 2 or 3 units up until February, I remember looking, that have a shoulder season. And I mean, you're so limited on what you're able to hunt those, but still, you got a tag and you want to fill that freezer with a cow. Heck yeah.
You go do it. Yeah.
And that's what I'm excited about this year is, I don't have a ton of tags. And, like, I want to chase a bull, but I've also gotten really used to having a freezer full of elk meat.
Yeah.
Like, I've taken some stuff before and had a little bit here and there, but I'm really used to having a freezer full of elk meat right now. And I was sitting there, I'm like, I don't have as much time to dedicate to hunting this year. Am I just going to go out and shoot a cow? I'm like, okay, I'm in Montana now. I'm going to take all of archery season. I'm going to chase a bull. I'm going to chase a nice bull all of archery season. Second rifle season hits, I'm grocery shopping.
Yeah.
The first thing I have an opportunity at is going down, getting processed, going in the freezer, And then I'm chasing mule deer.
When you asked earlier, there's sometimes when I don't bring cameras. Yeah, I go hunt whitetail does every year. And like when you use the term grocery shopping, that's the term I use for it. And in my CPA life, I'm blessed to have so many great clients who they have an overabundance of whitetail does.
Nice.
And I call them. I'm like, hey, can I come out and shoot a couple whitetail does? You only want to shoot 2? Well, yeah, that's probably, I got a lot of other meat, but I share a lot of meat too, with the employees here, with neighbors and friends and stuff. So, yeah, we're lucky. There was a time in Montana, it was like in the late 90s. I think we were allowed 99 whitetail doe tags. It's like, why the hell put a number on it? I mean, who's going to...
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just because before Y2K, the computers only accepted 2 digits.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would have, said 999. I don't know. That was there for a year or two. And I'm like, how many whitetail doe tags do you really need?
99 white... Oh,
now I think we're allowed one way. I applied for a whitetail doe tag, and then I can buy another over-the-counter region-wide whitetail. So I'll have 2 of them, 2 whitetail doe tags this year.
I've got a couple of buddies with some property and some ranches, and they guide and they do a lot of that stuff. But I think if it gets down towards the end of the year, and I just want to put the hammer down on a cow or something like that, I could probably call them up. And
yeah, usually they're wanting to get a few thinned out before winter, because we know what happens to haystacks and such in the wintertime. So that's, the other part. I've come to realize the blessing of living in a state where you have good resident opportunity like Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. You can kind of shoot for the stars a little bit in your out-of-state applications.
Yep.
Because you have this safety net of, well, I already got an elk tag here in Montana. I'll swing for the fences in Nevada or Utah or whatever it might be. And so a lot of people ask me, how is it that you've been so lucky to draw all these tags? Well, a couple of reasons. One, I started doing this multi-state. My one friend says I carpet bomb the West with applications. And I started that in 1995. So I built a lot of points in a lot of states.
Oh, yeah.
And some I've burned, and I'm back, kind of working through the systems again. But it was always the fact that I knew I had a deer and elk tag in Montana. So, all right, I'll try for a harder to draw tag in the other states. And so that was one of the blessings that I think Montana hunters, maybe Wyoming, Idaho, we take a little bit for granted. I mean, go talk to Nevada people or Utah people, New Mexico, Arizona, Oregon. I mean, if you don't luck out in the draws, you're tagging along and you're going to be the cook at someone else's elk camp is what your taste elk hunting is going to be that year. So,
well, I'll tell you, coming from California, we had a lot of opportunity in California, and prices weren't awful for residents, but I mean, definitely a lot more expensive than here. And we had opportunity for a few things. Like, I was pretty much guaranteed a deer tag every year. Like, there's, no question. I'd put in for the draw, but I don't think I ever didn't draw what I put in for as far as deer.
Yeah.
We got pig, we got, waterfowl, we got a ton of great stuff, but anything past that, I mean, you're spending 14 to 17 years trying to draw a, trying to draw an elk tag.
Yeah.
And if you draw an elk tag and you go hunt Rockies or Roosevelts in California, you're an idiot.
Yeah, you want to hunt two leads or something if you can. Yeah. Yeah. You'll get a kick out of this. No matter which platform you look at for our analytics, our number one audience is California. And I show that to ad agencies. Whether it's the podcast, our forum, our YouTube content, whatever it is, they're like, how can this be? There isn't much hunting in California. Well, they say that 1.5% to 2% of Californians hunt. Well, guess what? When you multiply that by 34 or 35 million people, that's a lot of folks.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, and my number 2 state usually is Texas, which again, really big population, more of a known hunting culture there than California, but because they don't have hardly any public land, it's quite expensive. That if you live there, you're going to have a lease if you're going to hunt. That's just a reality of life.
Yeah.
And if I lived there, I can assure you I would have a lease because I like to hunt that much. That's just how it would be. So when I look at the demographics of, we call them the geodemos, the geographic demographics, it's really eye-opening for me to see where folks are interested, and then I can drill down even further to see what videos got consumed. Because even a certain video or a certain podcast, I can get that data, and sometimes it's, I'll have a whole bunch of people from Colorado who watch it more than Texas, more than whatever. So I'm not that surprised that you say when you say that you had pretty decent hunting in California.
Well, there's, and it's, again, even in Southern California, there's a lot of incredible opportunity, and the community there, I think so much of it is the community there. You almost kind of, as a hunter in California, almost kind of pride yourself on being like, yes, I'm the only hunter in California. I'm on my own. It's like, there's a little bit of that mindset, because it is difficult to talk to people about it. But I think the community there, because of, just the constant attacks on it, and they can't always attack firearms, so they'll attack hunting to get at the firearms people, and stuff like, with the mountain lion hunting, they just recently banned the bobcat hunting.
Yeah, and use of dogs.
Trapping is gone.
Yeah.
And, we have some of the best bear hunting. Up in Northern California.
Amazing
incredible bear hunting.
Yeah.
But you can't trap, you can't bait, you can't dogs. That's not my style anyway, but
yeah,
there's a reason we never reach our bear quotas every year.
It's tough to do.
Yeah.
We are lucky in Montana, that is for sure. Archery antelope season starts a week from when? A week from Monday?
It's soon. I know my neighbor and his. I can't remember if it's my neighbor or his son that drew. One of them drew a nice tag.
It's a week from Sunday. So August 15th, people will be out archery pronghorn hunting, and then 20 days later they're out counting.
Yeah, I'm so far behind with elk season. So far behind with my shooting.
I've been shooting all summer, but I had a really bad case of COVID this winter, and I'm still bearing the lingering effects of that. So my physical conditioning right now is so bad. This will be the worst cardio level I've ever had entering a hunting season. But well.
I think I'm at about the same spot.
You don't look like it.
Well, I've been working through some stuff with Hill Lampers. Okay. So I signed on with her, and so she's got me on a regimen, and I'm starting to get the health back.
Cool.
But I just not in quite enough time to have the cardio level up. I can plug along all day long. Yeah. But that doesn't mean by the end of it I won't be wheezing like
I'll be
like a 60-year smoker.
Yeah, I'll sound like one of those seals down on the harbor that barks and flops around. That'll be me. But I'll be giving it my best effort. I am blessed that south of town where I live, I have a spare lot next to my house that in today's real estate environment. People realize I have this vacant lot, and Bozeman being as crazy as it is, I get calls all the time. I'll buy your lot. I have a client who wants to buy your lot. No, that's my archery range. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they're thinking, does this knucklehead know how much he could sell his archery range for? But I don't really care. I like getting up in the morning before I have my coffee, walk over, shoot my 9 arrows. I shoot 3 at 40, 30, 20. And then come back over the lunch hour, shoot 9 more, and then after dinner, shoot 9 more. It's not just the archery part of, the practice and the form and everything that means a lot to me. If ever I'm just wanting to clear my mind, I either go for a hike or I go shoot my bow. And we're so blessed to live in a place where, you can do some of those things without having to drive for an hour to get to some place you can do it. So I'm, next person, they're getting close though, Sam. Pretty soon someone's going to offer a dollar amount where it's like, you know what, I'll go find another archery range. These people are stupid. I'm like, whatever. If that's what you want, Oh well.
So, say somebody's not lucky enough to be a Montana resident, and if they're looking for opportunity, they want to be hunting elk and mule deer every year. They just want to get out as much as possible. What kind of strategy should they be looking at?
I get asked this a ton, and I tell people first thing you got to do is define what your budget is, financial budget and your time budget, and then have a short-term, a mid-term, and a long-term plan for whatever species it is that interests you. There's some states where you always have a fallback plan. Like Colorado has over-the-counter elk second and third rifle seasons in a lot of units, has a lot of over-the-counter archery seasons. So you can be building points or throwing your name in the hat in states that don't even have a point system. Say New Mexico, there's no point system. It's $65 for a license to apply. Well, you never know if you're going to draw. And if you don't, you go to Colorado. Or, maybe Wyoming, you say, well, I'm just going to pay my $50 and buy a point every year until I got 6 or 7 points or 3 points or whatever. And off you go. So it really is sitting down and saying, what does my budget allow for? Some people approach it really unrealistically. They're like, wow, I want Nevada, Utah, and an early rifle elk tag in Arizona. Wow. Lightning might strike and you might draw that with less than 20 points.
Enjoy your first hunt in 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I tell people, if that's your strategy, you are missing out on so much between now and when you might eventually someday, if ever, draw one of those tags. You're not having the experiences. You're not building your knowledge about elk and the mountains and the other hunting. And I tell people, if you just want to come out and get familiar with the West, antelope tags are easiest to draw in most states, or whitetail tags. So a lot of the things you're going to have to understand to hunt antelope or hunt whitetails is translatable to elk and mule deer, where, okay, we got some weird land ownership patterns here, how the tag system works. How thermals work, how, travel management plans. There's just a lot of stuff that's a little bit foreign if you've never hunted out west. It's like, what do you mean I can't drive my ATV over there? No, we have travel management plans. You got to stay on designated open roads and trails. Or what do you mean I can't this or I can't that? So there's just a lot of stuff, I think, that translates really well. So don't discount the idea of coming out and hunting, like I said, whitetails or antelope. But if it's elk, mule deer, whatever, even if antelope's your gig, have a short, mid, and long-term plan. And
that's kind of what I ended up doing is, my long-term plan's always been Arizona, and I ended up drawing that on 3 points for elk and still building the mule deer tags.
Yeah.
Or the mule deer points, but then I'd always apply in New Mexico. I have a credit card especially for applying in New Mexico that is low interest, that I don't have to worry about paying off, and typically just get that money back.
Yeah.
Then I would put in for like every year for either Colorado or Idaho, which is, I could pretty much be guaranteed. Idaho's gotten a lot harder to draw as a non-resident for elk now.
Yep. And, you know, I look at some of the states, you got to buy a non-resident license just to apply. But there's some states you don't, you know, like Wyoming. You don't have to buy the non-resident license to apply. You got to send all the money in, but...
Well, and that's with Wyoming. I would just, you know, just because a lot of other states I'd put in regardless, rather than just buying a point, just on the off chance.
Right.
But Wyoming, I was kind of like, oh, I'm not ready yet for that, so I'd just buy a point. And typically by that time, I usually just forgot to put into the draw, and I missed it.
Yeah. Well, excuse me, I need more coffee this morning. I also tell people that if you do buy the non-resident license to build points, you may as well throw your hat in the ring that year instead of just buying a point. Unless you just know there's no way your schedule will allow it, because you never know when your lucky year comes up. I mean,
well, a 0.01% of a chance.
It's still better than a 0% chance.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah, what was that show? What were those two goofy guys?
Oh my gosh, Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah. So you're saying there's a chance?
Yeah, and it's like Arizona. You got that license, and that's why I would always go down. This year, I'm not. I particularly didn't do it also because they did the draw earlier this year. And I actually still had my license from the year prior, so I could put in for the draw. I didn't draw, and I'm like, well, I'm not buying a new license now.
We usually go down there archery coos deer hunting. I've never done the archery mule deer over the counter. They changed that a lot this year because this is weird when you look at the numbers. Arizona has a policy that if more than 20% of the harvest is coming from archery, they put the archery on limited entry. So as the drought has dropped total numbers, they've dropped rifle tags. So the rifle harvest is a smaller number, but the archery stayed the same, and the what do you call it, harvest rates. I don't know what created this big spike in harvest rates in the last few years with archery in Arizona. So those mule deer, a lot of those got moved over to limited entry this year. So they're not over the counter. Coos deer, good luck over exploiting the resource with a bow with coos deer. We always go down and do that. And last year, Marcus in our office finally, after our 4 or 5 years of being down there, he finally shot one of them. That's the first time any of us have ever taken one. So
that's one thing.
Know, your buddy Ryan Lampers, he came down one year. I'd met Ryan a couple times, and he said, "Hey, I might be down there. You mind if I stop by where you're at?" "No, sure, stop by." First day he goes out, he shot this ridiculously big coos buck. I'm like, I didn't know they got that big, Ryan. But that doesn't surprise me with him.
Jeez, yeah.
You put a bow in his hand, and there's a deer that's in trouble.
I remember, I'm not sure if I've told this story on the podcast before. I came out last year for Western Hunting Summit, and I was staying at their place. I was helping them out with some stuff. They're like, "Oh, just come crash in our guest room." I'm like, awesome. So I come in, and they're like, "Yeah, we moved in. We've got most of the stuff hung up. We got the big elk, hung up on the wall, and got the small stuff down in the basement." And so then a little bit later, we're walking down, and again, the small stuff in the basement is bigger than any elk I've ever seen, and they're all just like stacked up, like just nothing. I'm like, oh my gosh, Ryan Lampers.
Yeah, some people have it. I'm not one of those people, Sam. Oh well, I have a lot of fun doing it though.
But those coos deer, that's one hunt I've been telling myself I want to do for the past 4 years, and I haven't been able to get down because I was on limited time before, so I'd just be kind of rushing in, and it was easy to get to the mule deer units. It takes a little bit longer for me to get down to the others, but I've been talking with. Do you know Corey Ford and Shannon Mobbs?
Yeah, Angry Spike Production.
Yeah, I love those guys so much.
Great guys.
2 of the greatest guys I know. Yeah. And actually, so they were at Big Sky. I got to see them for a second. They've bugged me a few Januaries about coming down for javelina and coos deer, and it's just I've never been able to do it. And every time I'm like just on the verge of just dropping everything. Screw the responsibilities and just hauling us down.
Going with Shannon and Corey would be two really good guys to go with.
Oh, yeah.
Don't go with Randy. There's a reason I get so excited when I shoot a jackrabbit down there, because it's about the only thing I ever get. But no, they're Shannon and Corey are really good guys. I bump into them down there once in a while. They'll text me, "Hey, you down this year?" Yeah. They've been doing it quite a while. So you gotta have your A game on to get out in front of those guys. So.
It's a wild trip. They've had some good stories. I've had them on the podcast a couple of times, and they a year or two ago we talked about they had an interesting hunt, and they got the two locked up coos deer. I'm not sure if you saw that.
No, I didn't.
They got they've been hunting, and they wanted to get they wanted to get their coos deer, and they ended up finding these two that were locked up, like just irreparably locked up, and they. And it was one of those things where they're like, okay, this isn't how we want to do it. But one, they're nice bucks. Yeah. Two, these things are going to be dead.
Right.
And so they took them, and we talked a little bit about that. It was a really cool story. But
I've never in all my hunting, when I've had a tag in my pocket, I take that back. Arizona, when I had the Arizona strip mule deer tag, 2 bucks were just tearing it up. But neither of them they were nice bucks, but when you have an Arizona strip tag, it's like you want a little more than really nice. So I did watch them fight, and my goodness, did they get after it. Just ripping it up. But other than that, I've never encountered
Really?
Yeah. And I know a lot of people who have, but I never have.
Even with elk, or?
Mm-mm. I mean, I've seen them jousting, and you hear them clacking and doing some things, but never just this tearing the hell out of everything
just
kind
the ground's
of fight.
Getting ripped up, and they're locked, and somebody's getting a tine in the side by the time it's done.
I've never encountered any of that, but maybe this year. Who knows?
There you go. Now that you said it,
I'm hoping I find 2 great big bull moose locked up here in Montana. I don't think the configuration of their antlers are such. I don't think they get locked up much, but
you never know. I've seen cartoons, man. I've seen cartoons about moose getting locked up, so it must be true.
I'm excited to go do it, and the whole period of hunting that we do, where we capture our content, it is a good mind clearing exercise for me. It forces me to walk away from the connections of internet, computers, and most of the time we're out of service, and so I don't have the every 5-minute distraction, and it's really, really powerful time for me to get my mind where I like to be. I'm thinking about people, stories, landscapes, animals, and how blessed I am to have the life I live, to have been born in an amazing country that something like this could be my daily life. I mean, if I was a senior in high school back in 1983, and you gave me a pen and paper and said, Randy, you get to draw out your life, what you will be doing at age, I started this when I was 43. Here's what you want to be doing at age 50. I couldn't have even dreamed such a wonderful experience. It didn't even exist in my mind at the time. So when people hear me say, what a country, I say that to try to cheer them up and get their perspective a little bit, but I truly mean it. That I don't know any other place I could live where the things that I get to do today could have happened to some snotty-nosed little punk from a logging town named Big Falls, Minnesota. So.
All right, so we got the TV show, we got the message board, we've got the podcast. Yeah. Where can people just find everything? Hunt you down?
Well, I'll start with our biggest one. That's YouTube. Our channel there is Randy Newberg Hunter. And then we have the podcast called Hunt Talk Radio. We have the podcast I do with Corey called Elk Talk Podcast. We have the big forum called hunttalk.com. And then out on social media, I use the same handle on all those, Randy Newberg Hunter. And there's a funny story behind that. Linda Reynolds, sorry to rat you out, Linda, but she's one of my great friends. Was one of my best clients, super successful businesswoman. She'd come into my office and she could never get a hold of me in hunting season because I was gone. So one day I come back and she has crossed out Randy Newberg CPA on my business card and wrote Hunter underneath it. And I called her and I'm like, you have come up with what I want to be when I grow up. She's like, well, I thought that's what you were out doing. I'm like, that's what I was out doing. So from that point on, I was Randy Newberg Hunter. Hell with that CPA stuff. So out on Instagram, Facebook, it's Randy Newberg Hunter.
I love that that's how the official name came about. But
yeah, I mean, most people are like MD, JD, blah, BMF, whatever else they want to be. Not me, man. The pinnacle of life for me was when I got rid of all those acronyms and just said Hunter at the end of it. So, pretty soon we're getting ready to launch a membership platform just because so many people have asked for it. They're like, I'm tired of sitting through ads, or I'm tired of paying for content with my privacy and my personal information. So starting in September, I don't know when this podcast will drop, but starting in September, we'll have a new platform called Fresh Tracks Plus. It'll be a subscription membership-based platform for people who, all our other stuff will still be there, but this is just like, you add on options, right? When new platforms become available, people adopt them. And if you want to be where the people are that like your content, you got to add more platforms and add more platforms. I don't know how many platforms I'll have by the time they throw me out of here, Sam. Hard to say. But so that Fresh Tracks Plus, you can find that out at, I think our URL for that is freshtracks.tv. And other than that,
is the show still on Amazon?
Yeah. You can, it's weird. All of the small platform stuff, in other words, anything that's not like big Hollywood production stuff, even though our numbers on Amazon were really, really good, this spring they converted them all to a rent or buy option only. So you can find us out there on Amazon Prime, but now they make it, you got to either rent it or buy it. Buy it, you download it. And quite honestly, I can't believe how many people are paying Amazon $28 a season to download it. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. But maybe I've been undervaluing our content all along. I don't know. But I can assure you that over on our Fresh Tracks Plus platform, it's not going to be $28 a season. Because there's going to be, 9 seasons of Fresh Tracks and 4 seasons of On Your Own. So there will be 13 seasons over there. And there will be all kinds of other content there too. That's why it's the plus part. Nice. So, but yeah, I forgot the Amazon thing. Thanks for mentioning that. But
I don't know if all these people paying for your content, we may have to add a new acronym. Just add PBD to the end there.
PBD.
A pretty big deal.
These guys, I got all these young guys who I work with here. They use the term OG. I'm like, what the hell does OG mean? Like, huh? You don't? I'm like, could you tell me? I guess it's like old guard or old
original
gangsta. Oh, okay. See, I already
You're
forgot.
the original gangsta.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry you had to explain. What do you call it? PBD?
PBD, pretty big deal. Oh. I just literally that is not actually a thing. I just made that up.
Made that up. Well, there, you should patent that. That's yours.
I don't know. It probably is a thing. Somebody's probably like.
I'm just blessed that we've had an audience that supports us wherever we're at and whatever we produce. We find new people who are interested in what we're doing, and so I don't ever see myself standing still. Anytime new platforms come out, I'm going to be experimenting with them and figuring out how can we make this work for our content to the audience that likes listening or watching or whatever. So,
all right. So to close it out, if somebody came up to you at Dairy Queen, you know, you guys both ordered a dilly bar, you're like, oh, hey, look, we both got a dilly. And you're talking, and they find out you're a hunter. And they say, you know, I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
That is something I've always wanted to do, but I don't know anyone that does it. I have no history in it. There's way too much to learn. It's too intimidating. I don't know if that's something I can actually do.
Yeah.
What, you know, as you guys are enjoying your ice cream, what advice would you give that person?
I'd say, well, you're already over the biggest hump. The biggest hump is deciding that this is intriguing. I want responsibility for my own food. I want to go out and learn when I hike a landscape, I never see it in the full depth as when I'm hunting it. So just making that decision and being interested in it that's a hard decision for a lot of people. So once somebody does that, I would just give them, my basics of what I think might be helpful, but I'd point them to a lot of platforms and directions. And in today's world, it's getting better and better. We still got to do a better job, but there's so much out there on the internet, whether it's video, whether it's blogs, content, forums, there are Facebook private pages or, groups, whatever they call them, about everything related to hunting. And I would do everything I could to encourage them to follow that interest and say, here's where it led me. I'm not saying it's going to lead everybody to the same place. Well, it'll lead all of us to different places, but I can assure them that the responsibility that comes with acquiring your own food, being connected to the land the way that you are when you hunt, or the water when you fish, is unique. And it's going to force you to look at the world a little differently than maybe you had before. And all those will be positive things. So that's probably what I'd say. My dilly bar might melt in the amount of time it would take me. But, and I try, like the crew, when we're traveling on the road, we bump into a lot of people who see us. And we got to be somewhere at some time. But if someone's asking me questions, it's all I can do to not stay there and try to answer as much as I can. And the crew's like, hey, tapping their wristwatch, like, we're late. I get it, I know. But this person, we're here creating,
Well, it all comes back to your
advocates.
main purpose you have written on the board, right?
Right. We're creating advocates. And as Grandma used to say, you can't do missionary work in the church. You got to get down to the bars and the back alleys. So that's where the missionary work happens. So,
Well, I am so glad that we got to take the time. 3 years in the making.
Yeah. Sorry, Sam.
No need to apologize at all.
Well, I'm glad we got to do it also, and keep doing what you're doing.
Awesome.
And,
Thank you so much.
Taking the time. Thanks for everyone for listening.
All right, y'all, that'll do it for this episode of The Wild Initiative. Make sure to check out the show notes page at thewildinitiative.com. Get links to everything we talked about in today's episode. Big thank you to Randy again for taking the time out of his very, very packed schedule to sit down with me and have just a fantastic conversation. Hopefully we'll get to do it again sooner than 3 years from now. But y'all, that'll do it for this week. Looking forward to next time. But until then, I hope this episode inspired you to get involved, get outdoors, and plan your initiative for the wild.
Thank you for listening to The Wild Initiative. Please take a moment to leave a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher, and head on over to thewildinitiative.com to get show notes, check out the blog, gear discounts, other podcasts from the Wild Initiative family, and more.